What's up, guys? Jumbo Prey, aka Casino Crime here. We are finishing up a video where we're talking about transitioning from No Limit to PLO. Here, I've got a video from my mid-stakes grinder, No Limit grinder, who's making the transition to PLO, one of my newest students. And we're going to be talking about the biggest differences between No Limit and PLO, and of course, how to adjust at these PLO 100 zoom tables. I'm not going to spend too much time giving any more background info. I'd rather just hop right into the action because that's what you guys came for. But my read so far is that my student here, he plays pretty solid. I like his style. He should, as is. I think that, as is, I think that he should be a winner at these limits, just like with his base of knowledge, identifying opponents, and reading board textures and stuff like that. But there's always opportunity to improve and win more, so that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, so I think this is kind of an interesting spot, actually. And now I think his fold on the surface looks pretty nitty, right? I mean, we have ace, king, king, 10 rainbow. It's a really strong starting hand in pot limit Omaha. And we've really only got two options, I think. Well, I guess we have three, technically. We could fold, we could pot it, or we could call. All seem like valid options. I really don't like folding, honestly. I think that our hand is just too good. It is cutoff versus button. And, I would imagine what he's thinking is that, we're deep with the button, so he doesn't want to get put in some awkward situations. And, that's for that reason, I think that 4-betting is kind of a bad option because we are deeper and we're just sort of teeing ourselves up to play a big pot out of position with a hand that, frankly, I don't think given the stack sizes, I don't think that it plays very well in that kind of situation. If we had a suit, I think I would 4-bet. But since we're rainbow, I choose not to 4-bet. I think, the deeper you are, or I should say, the lower the SPR is, the more suitedness really matters to me. It's so, having a flush draw or a backdoor flush draw is huge. So, I don't know. If we were suited, I would 4-bet, but rainbow here, I would just call. I think that we, because of the way stacks are, because we're a little bit deeper with the button, I think it's a good spot to call and hopefully flop something good, and maybe we can win a big pot that way. And I also think once we cold call, it's pretty unlikely that the cutoff is going to just back raise and push us out of the pot. And if he does, it only costs us 10.5 big blinds, so it's not a big deal. And I'm also confident that he wouldn't just rip it in with a non-aces hand there. I think that it's too easy for him to call and close the action and take a flop. So I think that that's the good option. Here on table 4, we call again, which I like. I mean, I don't see us folding. It's not thrilled about it. I think that sometimes we could turn this into a bluff on the river, but a lot of times people just go into check call mode here with 2-pair or something else like that. So I don't know. I'd try to get to showdown, but it's pretty clear that our hand's not going to be. I think it's pretty clear that he's going into check call mode. I mean, it's those situations where it's clear that our hand isn't good, and we say that we're going to try to get to showdown, but we're not really trying to get to showdown because I think that our hand just is pretty clearly not going to be good on that run out most of the time. I would c-bet on table 1. I mean, I expect to get peeled a lot, but I think that because we have kind of a top pair blocker, I mean, it's not the biggest source of value from our hand. It's nice because it reduces the amount of combinations that people have that can fight back against us. So I still think it's a good spot to c-bet. Here, I actually think I would barrel, and some of the time I would certainly actually even turn it into a bluff on the river. I think that 9-jack combos are going to be pretty unlikely. 6-9 combos are going to be pretty unlikely. And it's important to recognize how much different this turn is than, let's say, if the turn was a jack. You know, if the turn's a jack or it turns a six, there's a lot more straightening combos because it was like the obvious open ender. But here, I think there's not as many. Like, it would have to be jack nine with a flush draw, I think, or like exactly 8-9 jack or 6-9-8. And I think that because we have a nine blocker, and I just think that it's actually like a decent spot to barrel and then maybe even fall through in the river and turn it into a bluff. But I would imagine now that he's checking, he's just going to check fold, which is fine. I mean, it's kind of feels sick to like check fold to that small of a bet. And that was one reason why I think I kind of like one reason I think that I kind of like betting and barreling. I think that like it allows us to realize our equity sometimes. And I think that, as I mentioned, I think that it's like pretty important to notice that the gutter combo got there rather than the open ender combo. I'd be much more likely to check give up if the turn was like an open ender combo. So we c-bet this flop and get called, which I think is pretty good so far, right? We don't have too many reads on this guy, but he seems loose. And I think that it's good to just like bet this for value and hope we take it down. I might check this back against some very aggressive players, but for the most part, my default here is to c-bet. Of course, we 3-bet on table 2. And of course, we c-bet on table 4, top pair and an open ender. Table 2, I think I would just bet and barrel. I don't see us getting jammed on here too much. He does seem tight, so that makes me think that he's going to jam a little bit more often. But with top pair and 2 backdoor flush draws, I just think it gets kind of awkward once we check, especially with that SPR. So I do like the bet. Top set, we're going to bet for value. Nice disciplined fold on table 2. Table 3 is a little bit awkward. You know, with no blockers, he's gonna have a flush a very high percentage of the time. I actually don't hate checking. I think it's okay. We kind of allow ourselves to get bluffed here sometimes, which concerns me. Of course, I just try to show down a winner here. He turns 2 pair with the same hand, but I mean, I think that we played that okay. As a default, most of the time I say you almost always want to continue your regression on static turns. And when it's close, I usually say to bet because, it just makes things less awkward. And the wider the ranges, the more likely I am to bet it. But I think that checking can be good. If I'm going to check a static turn, it's going to be in that kind of situation where we have no blockers and their range is just very flush draw heavy. Here we open on table 3, I hope. And, this is a hand where I think I would fold it from the cutoff, but pretty much any double-suited hand I open when it folds to me in the cutoff. And I think that that's a pretty good default. Like, any suited ace and then any double-suited hand are pretty safe opens in almost any game from the cutoff. I would have to have a particularly tough button player in order to just, like, outright fold that. This guy's kind of going off. I'm certainly playing the hand on table 1. I don't even hate 3-betting it. Single suited aces with a Broadway are pretty good against like ranges that are this wide. The benefit of 3-betting would be being able to play this hand heads up. I mean, it is a good like quote unquote pulling hand when you're trying to pull other players into the pot. But on the other hand, I just think that there's so much value. There's so much value to be had when you get to play heads-up pots with weaker players in position. So it's a good pulling hand, but I don't know. I mean, if it was a stronger pulling hand, let's say it was like, I'm trying to think of a better, like if it was like ace-9, 8-7 with a nut suit, maybe that's like a better hand to call with, but I love like 3-betting with 2 Broadway cards. Not even two Broadway cards like Ace Queen with a suit, Ace King with a suit against wide ranges typically plays pretty well, especially Ace King with a suit. I really like playing those. Just because like they have all kinds of ranges that are this wide have just so much different trash in them. I probably would have stabbed on the flop, honestly. I think it's unlikely that we get I think it's unlikely we get check raise there. I mean, it's tough for the big blind to represent very much. And I think most of the time when players are this loose, to me it seems like he's a weaker player. I usually just assume that they're checking giving up. I would bet fold. I wouldn't be happy about bet folding, but I would. And I think that it's also a turn where, so, you know, when we check back here, we call it polarizing, right? And I typically don't polarize unless my hand is strong enough to call on like almost any turn, and I don't think that our hand is like that. I mean, certainly we can call on a club, certainly we can call whenever we make two pair, but otherwise, all we're really doing is allowing other hands to pick up equity, and I'd prefer to just bet it myself. And you know, our hand is, even if our hand is best, it's pretty vulnerable to even like bottom pair and side cards or some other like random gutter type hand. So I'd prefer to just bet it and take it down in that scenario. And I would say that that's a big mistake, or that's like a really common mistake. A decent flop, I guess, on table 4. I would say that's a pretty common mistake for people who are converting from no limit. It's kind of like the thing nowadays to, you know, polarize, of course. But I think that like a lot of no limit players kind of choose the wrong hands to polarize with. Or they just kind of polarize with hands they shouldn't really be polarizing with. They polarize with hands they should be merging with. And I think that it's like a pretty common mistake. Pretty sweet to get check raised here. I think the play would be to call. Really don't see, there's like no real sense in jamming because we have the redraw. We really want to try to keep in, you know, if the small blind has like the nut flush draw, we want to let him draw to that because nut flush draw is drawing poorly. And we're going to be able to get it in on the turn anyway. So I do like the call. If you see someone do this, like, you know, they're always like incredibly strong. But you'll see, like, you know, if we jam, he might make like a good fold with like, I don't know. Maybe we can get him to call one more time with like King Jack X or something. Who knows? We had a very big redraw against that guy, but unfortunately we split. But that's okay. I like the way we played it. I think I would, yeah, I mean, I would just open table 4. It's fine. Against someone who's particularly tough, I'd probably just fold. There's nothing like worse than these low rundowny double suited hands against someone who's aggressive. I mean, it's like they play poorly in 3-bit pots. They don't have a lot of nutty barely equity, and they're just difficult to play. So they're great hands in position, but out of position, man, they're really tough to play. It's also like this is the kind of hand where if we're in the big blind, I'd just outright fold it to good players, but I'd be a lot less likely to fold it against bad players. Here on table 4, sometimes I'd limp it. I mean, it's not a great hand to play in a limped pot, but I think that like there's a decent chance that it'll go limped. I don't know. I take that back. I think folding it's best. If we were on the button, I'd limp it. If you're on the button, I'd limp it, but from middle position, it's probably a bad limp. I think that just nowadays I'm so used to playing. I've been playing a lot of live, so I'm used to players not isolating as much live. But I think that online they kind of do. We could have maybe peeled there on the button. Here, like, my decision of whether to peel on table looking at table 3 here, and you can see we're running up some serious stacks. This is when Zoom gets fun, is when you just start getting stacks. Table 3, like, I mean, he only made it 2.5x. Let's look at his stats. I mean, he was a little bit more of a like regular player, so maybe it's, but we are pretty deep, so we can apply a lot of pressure in position. I think I'd peel there. Suited ace, pocket pair, those are hands that actually like play pretty well deep, so I think I'd peel there on the button. That's fine. Depends like how squeezy the players behind are, but actually even if they squeeze, like that's actually kind of nice because we're so deep. And that's really what you want. I'd probably fold on table 1. I mean, in these scenarios, you sort of have to ask yourself like where the profit's going to come from. So maybe we had a plan post flop of what we were going to do against this player. Like if we had a good read on his c-bet, then that's fine. But it's like a pretty trashy ace, and I think that most of the time we'll probably end up check folding or get ourselves into sort of a tough spot post flop. I also think like I'm a lot less likely to peel because he potted it. Typically play much tighter from the blinds when facing pot-sized opens. And if he like min opened or something, I would always call pretty much. But I don't know, he potted it. He's got a strong range to begin with. Our hand plays pretty poorly against a strong range. So I kind of prefer just folding pre. I do like the check raise though. Boom. So, well played there. I would fold this king 10-8-5. I mean, if we were deeper and the plays behind me were straightforward, maybe I'd 3-bet it if the guy was bad enough. But it's a pretty standard fold. Especially when we're playing Zoom and we can just see so many freaking hands. I'd open this on table 1. I love the ace king 10x single suited combos. It does hurt. Some people might be thinking that doesn't it hurt to have like ace king suited? Yeah, it does, but it's still a good flush draw to have. And the ace king Broadway combo is pretty dang good, especially against like looser ranges. And I also like ace king Broadway because it really cuts down on the number of combos people can 3-bet with. And if you're playing at a particularly loose table where people are loose passive pre, then you have a lot of domination potential post flop. And also if you're playing at like an aggressive table, then that's a hand that's like a pretty good candidate to 4-bet. Interested to see how we play table 3? I'd probably donk. I think that's what's best. I'd just keep betting. I mean, we do have an open-ended straight flush, but only one of the one out to a straight flush, I guess. I think he has an 8 a decent amount, but he could have some assorted like overpairs and stuff that will fold, and we have a lot of equity against that. And I think even more so, it's like we're unlikely to get raised. I'd probably shut down now, though. I think like most of his overpairs would have folded the turn, so I'm not going to try to get this guy to fold an 8. A 9's pretty unlikely. I don't know. I don't hate a barrel, but I think I'd probably just give up. I think he's kind of tied to the hand. I would imagine he is. That's the thing is like he's got an 8 way more than he's got a 9. And it's just a matter of if you think he's actually going to fold an 8. There, I'm not really sure people will. I'm not convinced anyway. I'd probably fold on table 4. I would imagine, just given what I've seen from him, from my student here, that he's going to fold as well. that deuce was like a 7 or an 8, I would open it. Of course, we flop very strong on table 3. I like the sizing. And I would continue betting too, and I'd go pretty small. We want to make sure that we're getting, I bet like 10. That's fine too. I think that like we want to just make sure that we're keeping in worse flush draws. You actually could probably value bet here. I think he's got a lot of like kings with a flush draw, over pairs, 9-6. Just I don't know, and he's passive, so I like value betting. I think it's good. Yeah, he says 5, 6, 7, 8. That's certainly in his range too. It'd be sick if he says 5, 6, 7, 8, and then check raises. There's a couple of ways to play table 2. I mean, I don't hate donking if it was checked to us. And when I'm deciding to donk in this kind of situation, I mean, it just depends. You got to think about how often you get raised. And I don't think that you would actually get raised there very much, so donking seems a little bit safer. Now, since there's 2 callers and someone almost certainly turned a straight, I would just give up. I mean, I would check and just hope to see. I think that like the button has a straight here a ton, given like his tendencies and given the board. I'd check and hope to see a free river. Hopefully the river's ace of spades. And then I wouldn't try to bluff here. Interesting spot on table 1. I mean, we have a wrap, a bad flush draw, and a pair. It's not a bad spot to pot it. Gives us a lot of options on the river. And I think it's pretty unlikely we get raised. In this kind of scenario, I guess we just call. And if we get there with our, if the river's a 6, I'm probably going to check raise. Or if the river's like, if the river's a 4, I think we should lead. But I think a river 6, he's like still going to be more likely to value bet. Oh man, we fold. I think that's got to be a bad fold. I mean, granted, like a lot of our outs are tainted, but still, I mean, we have like there's a couple of cards that are like extremely deceptive, which is nice. So we have more implied odds that way. And like, although we potted it, I mean, I think we still should definitely be calling there. I don't like folding. I'd probably fold though on table 4. These are trashy queens. He did 2.5 exit, but got the big blind behind us, and he seems pretty aggressive. And the button, I mean, he's bad, but not like particularly bad. And what's interesting is like we can't even really take advantage of how bad he is because we're out of position. So I'd prefer to just muck this pre. These are very weak queens. It's just like in most scenarios, if you're facing the decision of whether to get involved or not pre-flop, it's if you can win with a bluff, you should pretty much always call. But if you can't win with a bluff, then you really need to rely heavily on your hand strength. Since our hand strength there is pretty low, and I think our ability to bluff post-flop is pretty unlikely, then it seems like a fold. That's usually like kind of the process I go through with myself. Is like, all right, well, let's be objective about this. Like, am I really ever going to win with a bluff here? Probably not. Table 1, I think I would 3-bet. The only real mistake is folding, but it's just a hand that plays really great in a 4-bet pot in case you do get 4-bet. And it's deceptive. And what's nice is in 3-bet pots when you do connect, it's if you do flop a set, which is about a quarter of the time, you have a lot of equity against practically anything. So you're going to be able to bet call a lot of flops. So I would have 3-bet there, I think. And I 3-bet so much in cutoff first button situations that when I actually have a good hand, it's important that I seize the opportunity. Table 4, I would c-bet and barrel. I mean, a double gutter and nut backdoor flush draw on a board where I don't think we get check raised too much. It's just a great opportunity. The small blind would be the best candidate to be check raising us because I think like since we're so much deeper with him, he's got a lot stronger hands in his like small blind calling range. So I could see like a lot of pocket kings in his calling range pre, but yeah, I mean it's still like nice because we can just bet and barrel so profitably. Here, I actually think I would continue betting. I think he could have some straight draws. I think that if this same player had actually called from the small blind, I wouldn't barrel here because he has so many more king X in his range. But for like, you know, closing the action and calling, I think his range is wide enough to make barreling here pretty profitable. I mean, and you know, he's not really going to raise very often with like a king X. I think he'll just call with that anyway. So we might even be able to get there. So barreling, I think is, and I like the sizing, is a good play. I think we're good here a very low percentage of the time. But there's no need to turn it into a bluff or anything like that. You know, in general, like in poker, I'm not trying to make people make big folds. I'm trying to just make people fold when they have like medium strength hands or nothing for the most part. Yeah. I think it's interesting to point out, like, so that's a good example of what's called a static turn, right? And on static turns, when people at these stakes call a barrel, they typically have the hand you're trying to represent. So I'm not really in love with, like, on static turns, kind of going crazy with the barreling for the most part. And we are getting to the end of the video, but I want to make sure that I cover this hand because it looks like we got a big pot. So let's see what happened. All right, so we check raise the flop, which I think is cool. I mean, this guy seems a little bit on the tighter side. So you could always like get away with just check calling too. I think like my check raise range, when you're this deep, is like extremely polar. I mean, I think that I would be more likely to check raise with like 8, 7, 9 X than I would with this specific hand, just because it's like it's got a blocker to value hands. It's got a nut gut shot, which is nice. I guess actually I kind of ignored the fact that we have ace 8, 7, 9. So I like it even. I do like it more, just because we have some backup with our ace 8. But I wouldn't hate just check calling either because we're deep and it's kind of awkward because we don't have any backdoor flush draws and there's not as many runouts that we can barrel. You know, I think that I'd prefer, like, if I was to check raise this flop with this hand, I'd prefer we had like ace 8, 9, 7 with a nut backdoor flush draw, or ace 9, 8, 7 with, I'm sorry, like ace 8, 6, 7. So like either top 2 and an open ender or top 2 and a backdoor flush draw. And I know it sounds kind of picky, but the thing is I think that we're getting peeled with a high frequency when we check raise. Well, either he's calling or he's peeling, right? So for the times he peels, like I want to make sure that we have like runouts that we can continue aggression on when we're this deep. And so that's kind of how I feel like. And I think that like most we don't have, if he does have a wide c betting range, we don't have that much to protect against anyway. So check calling can allow us to get more value from bluffs. And just like when we're this deep, I mean, you really should have a very polarized check raising range on the flop. So, and you know, as played, I think that he looks like he bets the turn for value, which I think as played is pretty good. Could check, I guess. Well, I guess we did check. It's pretty awkward, and you can see kind of like the spot we've gotten ourselves into now that, he's like, God damn it, what do I do? I might just fold. I just can't see how we're going to make money here. And I think that also when we check raise and then he bets the turn, he looks so strong. So strong. And what are we really calling for? Like, we're calling to basically only win on a 6, because otherwise we're just going to check fold. And I don't see him really slowing down. So I don't really like how he played this hand. But that's okay. It's good to learn from it. Would be a pretty sick call, though. I just can't imagine us really being good here. Oh, he tried to call. We tried to call. I saw it. Kind of wish we would have so we could see what he had. Okay, and that's the end of the video. So, I'll probably continue to do mentor style videos, but I'll also probably move back into like the live play stuff so we can talk about kind of my approach. If there's anything specific you guys want to see, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in the forums. John Beaupre, aka Casino Crime, signing off. Thanks, Deuces Cracked. Good luck, guys.